Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Pi webinar. My name's Nick Cuthbert. I am the Director of Insight at the Pi. And for the next hour, we're going to be talking about revenue diversification, specifically the universities that are unlocking China online. This is a live webinar and it has been a really, really popular subject. So lots of people registered, and I can see you're joining us now. So you're very welcome, everybody. Please, we do these things live so that we can get interaction from the audience, that we can specifically answer the questions that you want answering, that you can draw on the expertise of our panel. So if you could use the chat function on the right-hand column, you can tell us where you're from, tell us what you think about what's being said. If you want to ask our panelists a formal question, you can do so using the question mark tab, and people can upvote those questions as well. And we will get to them later on in the session. Okay, so I will introduce the panel. Today we have Charlie Iniuzzi. I said that perfectly before.
It works. That works.
Iniuzzi, who is the global president of Beacon Education. We have Carmen Chan, who is vice provost for NAU Online, which is Northern Arizona University. And we have Clay Hensley, who is a consultant in international higher education, particularly specializing in the US market. Charlie, me and you, we met, I think, 2 years ago on a panel about China, and I was really, really fascinated by the work that Beacon do. So I'm thrilled to have this time with you.
Yeah.
I think people are going to find this really, really interesting and insightful, because China is so dominant, so important in internationalization of all of our universities, but it's been facing specific challenges. Their numbers have been flatlining and declining in the US, and many markets, particularly places like the UK where I am based, we're having issues around visa allocation and immigration, which means that universities are looking to diversify. So to set the scene, I think first let's go to Clay. Clay, tell us about the universities that you speak to, some of the challenges they're facing on these lines. Give us the US perspective.
Well, I was in Toronto during that great session that Charlie was in, and was very much impressed by the really insightful, incisive, and fresh takes that panel. And the Pi always, just does a great job of convening key stakeholders and great ideas. So what I'll try to do is add a little bit more of a trajectory of in the clients or partners that I work with, particularly around NACAC, those dealing with the IB in Cambridge, we're working with them. What we've seen over the past, say, 2 decades is China was, and really has always been a very strong graduate student sender, and not only to the U.S., UK, Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, all of the major destinations. China has been a postgraduate sender. Around 2008, so around the inflection point of where the Great Recession was dwindling, Barack Obama had been elected. The U.S. saw a huge influx of undergraduate student enrollment from China, and it shot up to the top in just a few years, and really didn't stop growing until, the Trump 2016, when Trump took office. So there was geopolitics there, and then that kind of soft decline plummeted during COVID.
Yeah.
Now, last couple of years, in total numbers, there's about 290,000 total students in the U.S. from China, and by far that's the largest source overall. India is neck and neck with it when you consider totals. Undergraduate, though, which for many U.S. institutions, these are not only a huge benefit to their communities, but a revenue source that they've increasingly depended on because of demographic shifts in our country. Now, these rhyme, they harmonize with what things that are going on in the UK, Australia, and elsewhere, but they're particularly severe in certain parts of the country with large institutions like the Great Lakes region or the Midwest, the Northeast, and they were very dependent on this flow of Chinese undergraduate students. So, and since 2016, there's been a 8% decline year over year. So CAGR, compound annual growth, and that continued last year. So U.S. universities are asking how we can continue to engage with China, and while still bringing in sources, but diversifying elsewhere. And India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa are places in the global South that they're looking for undergraduate students. But in the meantime, graduate students, particularly master's programs, and those that are, because the market is much more cost sensitive than it used to be. There's also different majors, whereas the undergraduate market was mainly business and econ, STEM, particularly computer science, and other science and technology majors are what's starting to dominate that graduate space. And that's where the solution, particularly that Beacon has made, I think is relevant at this inflection point. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. So we have this diversification of China as a market. How do we continue to engage with China, with the US kind of struggling in that geopolitical space a little bit? But Carmen, before we come to you, Clay, I'm just going to ask you to touch on the fact that there is this demographic decline in the US. So diversification is needed in general, so to online and to international revenue streams, because I think the domestic population, university age population, is going to decline by 15% by 2025, something like that. It's quite a significant decline. So the US is already ahead of the game in terms of trying to look at online and international to fill this gap. Is that right?
That's right. They're trying to innovate and adjust, and international is a key part of that, but another touch point in this is the U.S. universities, particularly those flagship and then regional publics, but also larger privates that tend to exist on our coast. So I'm thinking universities like Northeastern, NYU, USC, GW, so forth. They have done well to pivot toward being attractive toward international students, both face to face, looking at online, but that's not going to be a solution in itself. Many universities are looking how to serve a greater number. So not just moving from secondary school to higher ed, which is the traditional pathway, that has become outdated long before now. But many of those institutions are trying to adjust where they can serve students at different touch points. And online learning, digital options have become one solution. But the fact that international can have both, by having that digital solution of online learning, can also apply eventually by having that great infrastructure there, can apply to domestic.
So much of the global demand that is increasing for international education is about increasing access, so affordability, but also online access as well. Okay, Carmen, I think everybody's excited to hear an institutional perspective on this as well. Tell me a little bit, does your mission reflect what Clay is talking about? And why online and why China for you?
Yeah, thank you. No, I think a lot of what Clay described is similar for our institution. In the online space in general, it's incredibly competitive to recruit students and bring students into our institutions as online education has proliferated across higher education and just education more broadly during the pandemic and in the post-pandemic era. And so, it's really caused us to, really look at our online portfolio and think about ways that we can diversify our audience of online learners and look above and beyond, our domestic audience, here here in the United States, but also, thinking about ways that we can support students and their education goals across a more global marketplace. And obviously China is a major and significant market in that space, but that has some of its own unique kind of nuances that we have to take into consideration in terms of offering programming there, but also thinking about the global market more broadly. And, we've had the opportunity to work together with Beacon over the last several years. And I will say that Northern Arizona University has a pretty unique online portfolio in that we have a personalized learning program, which is a competency-based education form of our online programming, in addition to term-based programming as well. But that competency-based education has really offered, I think, a really interesting way to approach online education in an international marketplace, where we can think about a subscription model in our pricing that really allows us to be able to be competitive in an international marketplace, knowing that the pricing is just inherently, very different for an adult learner student who happens to live abroad and who doesn't necessarily have the luxury to be able to uproot and move to the United States, or otherwise have a more traditional graduate experience or undergraduate experience in the way that we might think of for international education. We were really thinking about how can we help to serve those adult learners, just like the adult learners that we serve domestically, but thinking about how can we do that in an international marketplace, and think about ways that we can come to them and help make education accessible from where they're at, for those place-bound students. And so in many ways, we view this as an extension of our mission, within Northern Arizona University. It's something we've done for a long time through statewide locations around the state of Arizona, and then online education sort of grew from that. And so when we think about, how do we go to our audiences that are joining us from elsewhere around the world, then this really offered a unique opportunity to kind of translate that vision.
Okay, and so obviously when you're delivering online, I mean, for our audience who are delivering online curriculum, I guess you can get a mixture of international learners altogether from different places in that community. Why is China different? And we're going to come on to this, but a lot of the institutions who are doing this are translating the curriculum into Mandarin, or at the very least, the student support into Mandarin. So why do we need a specific solution for China?
Yeah, I think as we were approaching our opportunities in China, with our competency-based education, our personalized learning program, we have a set curriculum that we were able to then translate into Mandarin by hiring faculty who are both content experts in the content that they were teaching, but who also have the Mandarin proficiency, and then working together, with Charlie's team and with Beacon to be able to translate essentially content from our platform into theirs. And again, it happens together in partnership between our two institutions, but with our faculty serving, again, as those content experts and translators, and ultimately the folks that are helping to directly support students in the classroom as well. So
I guess, yeah, to be clear then, so this is working age professionals in China. So not the traditional market that would choose to go and study abroad. This is a completely new market segment, and this is what we're talking about here. Complete diversification, opening up through access online, a new revenue stream, and new access to a new market in China. Okay, yeah. Charlie, let's come to you then. Yeah. I can see here the interest you can see in the chat here. There's Douglas Proctor from Swinburne in Australia, Daniel from St Andrews in Scotland, Deborah Hines from Nottingham in the UK. People are really interested in this all over the world. Tell us about who you're currently working with and who Beacon are in this process. What are the services that you're providing? How are you unlocking this opportunity for institutions?
Yeah, I mean, the history of Beacon is honestly relatively straightforward, and I think it'll be resonant to most of the people in the higher ed space. I mean, we saw these high quality programs being delivered by universities around the world in online education. And there's this massive gap in terms of Chinese learners that are accessing those programs. Back in 2018, the team of us in Beijing, we tried to figure out why does that gap exist? And honestly, it's not that complicated. A lot of the students didn't know that these programs existed at all. So a lot of it is front-end awareness, but secondarily, students, and as the universities have gotten better and better at online education, they expect a high quality experience, and high quality in the context of China means localization. It means making sure all the support and technology is built over there. to your point about the kinds of learners, we weren't, when we started, we were not sure what kinds of learners would want this the most. And so we spent a lot of time trying to build programs for undergrads, even with NAU. I mean, NAU is one of our oldest partners, and we're still trying to figure out bachelor's completion programs and how to do 1+1s and all these things. But fundamentally, the students who are leaving China are leaving China. And they're not super interested in a different way to get their degree. If they're going, they're going, they're going. And we stumbled. I mean, you guys probably knew that faster than we did. We thought there was a chance that might work. It didn't really work very well. And so we shifted towards these captured groups of older working professional learners who need upskilling resources, need some kind of professional development, have companies that are really interested in getting their students to have more degree-based upskilling themselves. And so that working professional market has been pretty good. We've leaned fully into that. We work with about 25 universities in the States across a variety of different programs. What we found is that the NAU models, these full stack models, where the university is building out full cohorts of working professional learners in China that are resourced by us, that were localized support services, localized technology stack, utilizing the university's faculty to make sure the teaching quality stays the same, using typically the programs that already exist from the university, or very rarely building things from absolute scratch, right? This is a thing that the university does really, really well. Figuring out a way to deliver it to these new pools of learners in China is it's an interesting task, but it works really well because it lets the university kind of do the best things that they know how to do, and lets us kind of work as a services provider on that end.
So your technology services provider, really streamlining the delivery to meet student expectations. You're not an education provider. The universities are bringing all that themselves. You're just making it happen for them.
Yeah, correct. The universities grant the degree. It's their program. It's honestly, in most cases, it's a thing they're already doing. It is just delivered to this different group in different ways, right? With Chinese language and local support structures. We do all the retention support and things like that. So a lot of those burdens are carried by us on the Chinese side. But it's more, even in that sense, we're utilizing best practices from the universities. The support systems are mocked up to mimic because the students, they don't want to be disconnected from the university. They want to be university students. They want to know that they're tethered to the university. They want to know that they're going to be full alumni. They want access to everything that a normal student would have. I mean, we had, Carmen, we had a bunch of students come to graduation this year, right? They flew over just to graduate and walk with everybody. So for us, we try to be in the background as much as possible. Obviously, the students are interacting with us all the time, but connecting to the university deeply is really the key.
So, Carmen, can you just expand on this focus then on industry? You both mentioned this, like competency skills, subscriptions, kind of 6 month elements of professional development, and then I guess it's colleagues from the same sort of industries or same companies even who are looking at doing this, and then they graduate and they're doing well in their careers, so more people want to do this. It's kind of perpetuating this sense. But to be clear, this isn't sponsored by their companies, is it? They're personally paying for this development.
Right. And that's part of what makes the subscription model so appealing to these working professionals, is they have an opportunity to come in and really focus their energy during that 6-month time frame and be able to move through classes at a quicker pace if that's what they choose to do, or to have the flexibility to go at more of a part-time pace if that's what's realistic based on their other life commitments and work commitments at that time. And so it gives them that maximum flexibility, but really does provide sort of an incentive or a cost structure that allows them to be able to move at their own pace and really make it an efficient use of their resources for tuition. But I think, really most importantly, when it comes to partnership in this kind of B2B model, where Beacon helps to connect us with companies, it also gives us sort of an inside scoop on what degrees and programs are the most applicable for them as working professionals, what's really going to help transform their lives and their careers to be able to move up in their industry, or to, achieve that promotion that they were working towards. And so it allows us to have that sort of conduit between us that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to easily create for ourselves in China. But we've been able to really kind of use that feedback loop back and forth together in order to strengthen our programs, as well as continue to think about new opportunities.
It sounds amazing. Right. I'm gonna get the nuts and bolts from you, Carmen, but not yet. First, there is a burning question that I have that I'm sure that the audience shares. Clay, I'm going to come to you on this one. in geopolitical terms, the US and UK have expressed that China is seen as one of the greatest threats to our society. They talk about cybersecurity, our institutions, and lots of universities are struggling to understand how to interact with China, how to have an institutional strategy to interact with China. So we have this part, but also we have a very practical part, which is that you often hear that the Chinese government do not recognize qualifications taken online, which kind of kills this idea in the water. So I'm struggling here. I'm hearing that it's a success from Carmen, that these people are finding professional development in their careers from these qualifications. But this is the kind of pervasive thing that we have, is that online in China isn't recognized. So Clay, I'll come to you first. Talk to me about the geopolitics and the way institutions.
Yeah, I'll set up the geopolitics, and I want Charlie to jump in on that recognition piece, because these are, like a lot of things in geopolitics, and even more specifically in China, these things are moving targets, and it's evolving, it's dynamic, quickly. But in the, I had mentioned that spark that really created the exchange, the greater exchange, particularly in U.S.-Sino relations. I mentioned the election of Barack Obama, but as much, Hu Jintao, when he was in power, and the liberalization of the particularly undergraduate visas allowed for this. But one thing I want to hit on is that even as China grew, what's unique compared to what we're seeing now in, say, South Asia and other parts of the global South, where immigration, and this isn't unique to the US or Canada, but also the UK, that's a major driver of those, particularly south of the equator. China was a little bit unique. It evolved over time, but whether you're talking about undergraduate, the bachelor degrees, or master's to OPT, many of their degrees were applicable in country. And in fact, the opportunities were within China and the greater region. So they weren't necessarily, of course, we would have those that would stay in the US or stay in North America for degrees, but it was really the skills that were offered that weren't available at scale to a wide variety of individuals. And I'm more familiar with the undergraduate space. But that's one of the key attractions, particularly of the U.S. system. And now I think that's what you're hitting on, is that the skills that can be supplied through a degree from Northern Arizona University are still applicable to the Chinese employer. Now, regarding recognition, that's where I would turn to Charlie about the official recognition of the Chinese government is a bit of a moving target and not my expertise. So, Charlie.
Yeah, the recognition question is an important one. It's honestly, it's the first question on the students' minds, right? The structures are mostly built, as Clay described, culturally around traveling abroad. And the Ministry of Education, their validation structures are entirely built around traveling abroad. It requires visa stamps. It requires demonstrating that you were abroad and studying, things like that. And so the online degrees don't check any of those boxes. And the Ministry of Education, Chinese government, they will not validate those degrees the same as anybody who would be going abroad. That, to be fair, is a challenge with some of the undergrads who perceive of that as very important, right? They want to get that validation. They're going to go into some kind of a government structure that's going to have some kind of recognition necessary. A lot of their uncertainty about the value of the degree going abroad is based on their ability to get that recognition. What we found, and it's been very interesting, is for the adult learners, the most important thing that they need is high quality upskilling from a real university. They're most interested in knowing that the university is accredited in its own country, that the degree they're going to get is from the university. Their employers understand, right, that especially for graduate degree programs and upskilling programs, that the quality of the program is the most important thing. And so it's certainly true that none of the students who do these online degrees in China, and there's other countries that operate in the same way, they're not going to be able to validate their degree in the same way as somebody returning from home. Once they understand that the program is the same that's being offered on the university campus, that's being offered by the university, that they're going to get the same degree, their companies themselves, they're all pretty comfortable. And a lot of that is just because there's a limited supply of available opportunity for the graduate degree learners in China, right? We always say that every year there's 4 million or so applicants to Chinese domestic graduate school programs, and there's only like 750,000 seats. And so if you're not coming directly out of undergrad, if you're not preparing immediately for the graduate examination, you're never going to go back. There's no real other opportunity, because one of the kind of part and parcels with the lack of a validation structure is that most Chinese universities don't really have infrastructure to deliver any online programs themselves. And so these opportunities being brought by international degree providers, international universities, not just from the US, but there's lots of countries, lots of programs from countries around the world that are, trying to figure this market out themselves. These are the only available option, and a really high quality option at that. But it does require trust building, right? Our first cohorts, I mean, Carmen, when we started back in 2018, 2019, right? The first cohorts are always hard, right? They want to see all of the high quality products. They want to make sure that the university is really working on. They want to know what Beacon's relationship is to the university itself, because it's a new market. This is kind of a brand new space. There's only 100,000 total online degree learners in China, we think, right now in general. We see a lot of them passing through our doors, like asking questions, things like that. But because it's such a new market, people are looking for ways to build trust overall. And once they see students in the programs, to your point, Nick, about referrals and the companies saying, oh, this is great, and sending people over like that, there's a lot of downstream benefits from that, but it takes some time to ramp up and get across those check marks. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think when I talk about diversity and diversification, it's putting it into context of these massive subcontinental sized countries with massive population growth or fast population growth. They're never going to be able to meet the demand for education or even jobs in many respects. But in this case, educational opportunities. So it's allowing this access for people that they may have question marks, but if this fits and it is quality, then they will go ahead and do it because they need to upskill.
Yeah, what we found is there's mostly question marks because it's new. It is legitimately new in China. It feels a little bit like, I mean, Carmen, Clay, you guys have been doing this obviously longer than I have, but it feels as though it's like where it was in the States like 10, 15 years ago, where people just have very fundamental questions in China, like the Chinese learners that we work with, about how does this operate? What is this? Is it real? That kind of thing. But once those first movers get in, once the universities have built real relationships, built some real infrastructure in terms of their own brand, because it's new, there's not a lot of competition, and therefore things ramp up and scale really, really quickly, and people are really, really excited.
Okay, a reminder to our audience, if you want to ask a formal question, please do so using the question mark tab, and we can get to them later. Charlie, just sticking with you here, you've talked about NAU. We're going to find out some more details, but who else is working with you on these types of delivery?
Yeah, we have a bunch of different partners. I mean, some of our NAU is actually kind of interesting because, as Carmen said, like they have the subscription model. We've been pretty flexible in terms of the actual mode of education, as it relates to the study model and the kind of structural things. But we have programs that don't have subscriptions, that are not personalized learning, that are in different program types. We work on information technology and CS related programs than NAU, things like that. But our biggest partners, Illinois Tech, Golden Gate University, University of Arizona, Rochester Institute of Technology. It's a scattering of universities kind of around the States. But mostly at this point, these full stack models are where everybody's really leaning into and trying to figure out. In the beginning, we also experimented with just marketing services, just trying to figure out individual pieces. But from the perspective of the university, the real key is getting in that 500 to 1,000 student enrollment range, and in the full stack model, whether it's personalized learning or not, but the full stack, full delivery model with real cohorts has been kind of the best that we've seen so far.
Okay. I think because there's lots of UK and Australian universities on this call, so I think a lot of them are going to definitely get in touch just to find out more. Carmen, let's come to you then. So can you try and explain to us, as much as you want to give away, how you deliver this? You've talked about competency split skills and industry. I think one of the most successful courses is on computer information technology. Is that right for you? Tell us how you select the courses and then how you facilitate the kind of curriculum delivery here. Are people going to have to hire more staff? How much content creation goes into this? How much support goes into these learners? Because we've heard that they do feel very supported.
Yeah, when we were selecting programs to put forward as part of this partnership, we really were trying to keep our focus on who the learners were and what was going to be most appealing to this kind of target demographic of working professionals in China. And so, our MCIT, our Computer Information Technology master's degree, has, I think, been our greatest success story, and is one that really offered an opportunity for folks that are working in IT fields to be able to move up, but it has sort of a different set of requirements compared to a computer science degree or compared to other it's just more accessible. It has a more kind of accessible entry point for folks that are coming from industry experience, and so that's been a great success. And again, it's been in partnership with kind of continuing to refine our thinking about how we improve upon our admission processes to make that efficient, together in partnership with Beacon. Sometimes having an outside lens that an outside provider like them provide helps us to kind of take a look internally at our own processes and find opportunities for efficiencies that I think has been helpful for us as we think about our approach to graduate students in the online space more broadly, above and beyond this particular partnership. But in terms of some of the nuts and bolts, I alluded to earlier, we did hire a specialized set of faculty who help to support these programs, who have both the content expertise in their field as well as, Mandarin native proficiency, so that they're able to help translate the content that we already had existing and that, again, was stable and successful programs, translating that, into the language that was going to be accessible for the learners that we were working with in China. Those same faculty who help to translate the content are the ones who also help to support the students in that personalized learning model, and are actually the ones working directly with students as well. So that's a long-term sort of commitment that we're, again, not just translating content and sort of, putting it out there, but that, again, those are our faculty that are continuing to support the students and ultimately helping them to achieve their education goals. Outside of the classroom environment and kind of the partnership there, we also had to be able to resource and thinking about some of our systems and our staffing in order to really kind of translate what was happening in the Beacon ecosystem, and again, where we sort of package our content and help work with them to translate that and put that into their learning management ecosystem that mirrors ours. We then have to be prepared to transfer that information back to our university ecosystem and be able to, get the relevant records updated, with our registrar, with other units across the university. So data integrity and really thinking about what those integrations look like is part, kind of a longer term part, and something that we continue to refine in this partnership. But in my experience, at my prior institution, the University of Arizona, the online unit that I was a part of there also had partnerships with outside organizations that were very similar to Beacon in this regard. And that kind of data integrity and feedback loop is something that is just part and parcel, I think, with these kinds of partnerships. But it's something that it's important to be prepared for and be realistic about, that you're going to need to dedicate staffing and resources to that in order to make it successful, so that, again, it feels like a seamless experience for the students, and it's us sort of working on the back end to make those connections happen in a seamless way.
I think the data element of online is such a superpower, really, because we can start adapting the curriculum to the way people are interacting with it. The times of day, the way they're consuming the different content pieces, the way they want to interact with tutors or support services. And the reality is we all have different learning behaviors. And so the online world allows us to adapt the experience to different people so that they have the best chance of success. Mm-hmm. We kind of led with this idea of revenue diversification, Carmen. Give us a ballpark around how many students are on your courses. Are we talking hundreds or thousands? Where are we at?
So we're approaching almost 1,000 graduates from our partnership with Beacon over the last several years. And, currently we're around 500 students that are involved in the program across some of the different programs, and all of them in one major. And we're looking at future expansion opportunities, as well as onboarding some additional programs in the future. I talked about the IT focused programs, but, again, knowing that we're working with a working professional audience, we're really focused on technology and business related related degrees, because we know that those are the most appealing to this particular audience. And so, again, we have some really great programs in our portfolio that allow us to be able to tailor to that global business audience, in addition to, again, thinking about what's going to really help, transform the lives of some of those working professionals that are pursuing the program.
Yeah. Okay. Clay, in my experience, some of the audience here will be saying this sounds fantastic, but it's outside of the circle of influence, because we're in kind of siloed positions in leadership around specific elements of study abroad or emissions. And some people, particularly in the ed tech field, they feel like they haven't got the skills to get into a kind of technology-based focus or delivery. How should people go about approaching this kind of opportunity internally with their institutions? How would you advise them to kind of consult on this?
Yeah, and I think that's, the timing is great as we move into NAFSA next week, where I think all of us will be in New Orleans, really looking at your strengths, what programs, I see a question from Amber, what subject areas are the most popular ones? Well, if you offer, if you offer these sort of programs already and are looking for an audience, and trying to find that, I think that looking abroad, and particularly in China, is a good place, to see if there is a match. Now, internally, particularly U.S. universities, much less universities outside the U.S., they're complex spaces. So if you're the senior international officer or you're an enrollment manager trying to see where that fits, I mean, the way you approach it is, you socialize it, you tease it out, you look for your peers, like NAU, like RIT in Rochester. You see who've been successful, and are there some connection points there in what you offer and what they've offered, but also with some distinguishing factors. That's what I would say would be a starting point, is that comparison point, being realistic about your capacity of what you can offer and expand, and your appetite, but for these sort of partnerships with partners like Beacon. I do see that this is the future. So universities that are those that are more innovative are the ones that can make this sort of thing happen.
Yeah. And many of them will have articulation agreements and the curriculum set in many ways. Charlie, how do you get started with an institution from looking at this type of partnership and how to get something off the ground? And then what's the kind of timeline? How fast can you get something online up and running?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Carmen did a good job of laying out kind of some of the core components of the build out model. I do think that NAU is particularly capable in terms of its own internal resources, because they had this entire division set up, right? They had very strong leadership and a focus and a prioritization. They already had the working professional focus. They had some of these programs that were really perfectly designed almost out of the box. And, we genuinely feel very lucky that we met when we did, because we at that time were unsophisticated about what the market needed. Over time, we've recognized that, the real key challenge that we've noticed from a university perspective is resourcing the growth of these programs before those first, say, 500 to 1,000 students come in. Once the numbers are generated, then there's revenue to work with, there's an opportunity to figure out how to expand, all that kind of stuff. And so in the models that we've built out more recently with newer partners and newer programs, we've been more comfortable helping them establish, right, all the support structures. We've been comfortable translating the programs ourselves, right, on the Beacon side, where the university then will come in and validate the translation that we've done. We're helping some of our partners find faculty and teaching assistants in China to teach these programs, rather than utilizing sometimes limited on-campus Chinese-speaking faculty who want to manage the program but not actually teach in all the courses and things. Some of our smaller university, NAU is also a large university, and so some of the smaller universities we've talked to have questions about those kinds of pieces. And, our ability to build those things in China is very easy, and our ability to help the universities find and get access to the resources is also pretty easy. the key real question, as Carmen said, is what programs exist right now, and do they need to be built from scratch or not? Because if the programs already exist, then the universities understand exactly what they need to do to teach it well. It's more just figuring out how to teach it well to this group of learners. On that front, though, then, we're delivering all the marketing and recruitment services in China for the programs. We're aligning with the brand and the controlling mechanisms from the marketing departments at the universities to make sure everything's lined up, because this is new infrastructure for the university brand across China, right? It's a new group of learners, but these are learners who are going to be alums, and they're going to have all these marketing assets and things that are useful to the university more broadly. And then from a support standpoint, we have our technology stack, we have our retention services, we have our teaching support structures, to help the faculty who are anywhere in the world teach on these platforms as well. And then those data junctions, like once the students come in, then a lot of, how did the student information system get updated efficiently? How do we make sure we're keeping to the university's academic calendar, right? Some of these questions are easier when if we keep things as simple as possible upfront, and then downstream grow once those first, not even 500 students, but say 200 or so, then the university is like, okay, this is working. We can lean in from that perspective.
Yeah, but you have the pioneering institutions like NAU who've kind of blazed the trail, seen some of the challenges and some of the best ways of delivery, and so now you have that blueprint, I guess, that you can adapt to different institutions. So the ones that come behind will benefit, I guess, from all of this learning.
Yeah, we're definitely a lot faster now, honestly. Right there. It used to take us, this is a little bit in the weeds, right? But it used to take us about 6 months to 8 months to start a new program from scratch, right? And that was a lot due to the fact that we needed to go out and do a lot of recruitment, right? The market was super untouched in terms of even answering core questions about this. At this point, we have alumni of programs. The universities have experience with this. We have other universities that have done it before. Yeah. And the B2B model with more of these corporate partners and channels, as Carmen said, they will tell us straight up from the beginning. We will not open up a program that will not be successful at this point. We will know, the market will tell us exactly what they want. If a university can do it, that's great. There's a ton of need. There's a ton of demand. We have wait lists for most of our programs at this point, but we're not going to roll the dice on something that wouldn't work. And so because of that, the students, those first cohorts are there. They're really ready to go. So it's actually more getting the infrastructure with the university set up around student information system, data flows, making sure that the enrollment structures are set, things like that. That usually takes us at this point 2 to 3 months if the program already exists, because we'll just translate the first couple first couple courses, and then we'll migrate through sequentially. That makes things a little bit easier on that side. So it's much better. Obviously, when we were starting, we were trying to figure all this out, but now it's much better and much faster. But we have to get the model right. If the model's not right, it's more like an all or nothing kind of a situation at this point with some of these newer markets.
I think that's really fast. Some of these things take years to get off the ground anyway. So this sounds pretty efficient to me. All right, let's double down on some of these questions then. So back on Amber's question, Carmen, she's asking really specifically about what subject areas are getting increasingly popular here. We've touched on the fact that it's kind of professionals in STEM areas, science and technology. Is that right? This isn't kind of liberal arts learning.
Yeah, I would say IT and business have really been kind of our sweet spot, or business related industry. Again, we've really tried to, even from that business angle, really focus on degrees that are accessible to working professionals. So not, things that have, an assumption of significant prereqs or kind of prior, for example, a bachelor's degree in engineering or something like that would sort of preliminarily, preclude students. We've tried to focus on things that are going to be more open access with more of a global and IT kind of focus area.
Okay.
Yeah, we think about it with 3 verticals. I think it's just simple laid out, and NAU has 2 of the verticals already, and that's been convenient, but there's a third that's interesting. And so obviously there's this information technology CS degree category, which is super useful. And, you can imagine NAU's, again, because you guys are more developed on this, there are these introductory programs like, information technology, and then there are higher level CS programs, and then eventually other programs in more specific areas. The second is the business field, where there's usually something like a management or a leadership program, and then there's an MBA, and then there's usually a DBA right on top of that, that kind of offer this full stack. The third, and the weird one that we actually have just started to understand the market on better, is psychology programs. And psychology is, we're to it late actually, but we just opened up a program, honestly, a month ago, and it has like 100 students in it already. And the demand though is coming from companies, right? It is perceived of as a wide-ranging degree that also captures HR departments, right? A lot of business professionals, things like that, as well as independent practitioners too. But it's it kind of fills out the portfolio a little bit. The unique aspect, I think, and I don't know if this is true for other online degree markets, to be fair, is that once we open up 1 or 2 degrees of the university, the companies and the channel partners want more. They don't want to look at other universities. They want to deepen their relationship with the university that's delivering the good program. And so they usually are the ones that come to us. The companies and the channels will come to us and they'll be like, okay, cool, you have an MBA. Can we get a CS program? Or you have the information technology. Where's the management leadership program? Where's psychology? So that like depth of construction is something that we didn't anticipate, but is like kind of exciting because it's a kind of a reliable way to grow from that first 1,000 student program into like a portfolio of 500 to 1,000 student programs overall that'll, build a pretty strong resource base. And then that to us is pretty exciting around those like new programs and the program developments. Carmen, you've seen that kind of, I think, over the last even just 6 months as we've started to look at the upcoming portfolios and programs. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of depth of relationship is appealing, I think, from a university perspective as well, because, there are many variations of what corporate partnership might look like, or these kinds of B2B relationships, but every company wants something different. Like it can go in a lot of different directions. And so to be able to have a deeper relationship where you can really have that be fruitful on both sides is something that allows us to focus our energies and resources in ways that are impactful for the students and also, good for our enrollments and ultimately for their employees. So it's a win-win for everybody involved.
And it's so good being close to the market. So you see these things shifting and you see the different skills gaps and that what people are looking for and what they're benefiting from. Okay, so there was another question from Peter May. Peter said, are dual degrees with Chinese institutions an option here to overcome this recognition issue? Charlie, you're nodding, but what we've kind of been saying is that there is a demand regardless of the recognition. I think it's really important to stress that, isn't it? Is that people themselves are seeing the professional skills and development is worth it because then that's helping them get ahead in their career, regardless of whether the degree as an online certificate is recognized by the government.
Yeah, the degree recognition has not been a barrier in any way. There is obviously, it's a pace barrier, right? Obviously, the students have more questions up front, but as long as the degree is being offered by the university, we actually prefer that in a lot of ways because then the university is using its best available resources. They know it's the same, things like that. There are lots of, permutations of relationships that take place with foreign universities, non-Chinese universities that are delivering with Chinese universities in conjunction with various partners. There's obviously, massive agent networks and things like that all across China too. So it's a pretty sophisticated landscape around the different kinds of partnership models. But we philosophically on our side, we're not inclined to do things that have been done before because those markets exist. There are dual degree programs. There are reasons that those have limitations on the total number of enrollments, that they're competitive with other programs. The new opportunity of these online adult learners, these untapped pools is much more interesting. And because it's not a barrier to enrollment or participation, that hasn't been too much of an issue. And whenever I talk to a lot of universities who are trying to figure out a broader China strategy. I know, Clay, you do this too, right? And trying to figure it out. You can always do things, try to compete in the places that already exist and try to build things that already exist. Those are well tread, right? That's totally fine, right? There's lots of opportunities and there's logistical simplicity to that in terms of understanding how things go and such. But therefore they're competitive and the results might not be there. And there's risk in terms of how much you're going to invest and such. And from our perspective, we've found that we've investigated all these ourselves. And obviously we're always looking for new and interesting and innovative growth opportunities for our partners too, but they seem less interesting than continuing to build out this market need that's pretty in high demand right now.
Yeah, I think there is this, I think it's true to say that a lot of institutions are attracting more applications from China and India but they're the same people. So it's just a duplication of what already exists. People applying and being attracted to apply to a whole range of countries, a range of courses, but really there's still only one student who can go to one course. This is completely untapping, or tapping a new opportunity, a new market segment.
And in China, China is going through its own demographic shifts that are actually in many ways more severe than what we're seeing in the US and elsewhere. So tapping into that new market. The other point I'd make on top of what Carmen and Charlie have already made is that when you're looking at that traditional exchange, people to people exchange, China is a high prestige driven market. Whereas this is a little bit less so. You have the novelty of it, the newness, the freshness allows for first movers, where the quality assurance is important. Not saying that accreditation is important, but having those very familiar names are not quite as important. So that tale of what we loosely call the tale of two cities or tale of two Carnegie classifications, it kind of gives those regional publics or those tuition-driven privates some opportunities to move first.
Yeah, we feel pretty comfortable building any brand. That originally when we started, we thought, to Clay's point, because we had our own biases around this as well, that the Chinese market of online learners would mimic the behaviors of the on-ground learners in terms of looking for certain brands. They don't know any brands. It's just a completely, like, these are adult working professionals who never anticipated going abroad, so don't really have a lot of information. And so from that side of things, when you're introducing these universities, we've been able to build a wide array of brands from scratch, which is, that's pretty exciting too. The flip side of that is we don't think there's going to be like space for 1,000 universities to do this, right? There are going to be 20 to 25 that are going to invest in that way. They're going to have significant revenue and enrollments from that. And the rest are going to try to figure it out in some smaller type way. But, because of the lack of sophistication amongst the learning population around international degree opportunities, there's a little bit more that goes into the front end of that. So that's the trade, but the benefit is definitely that anybody's brand can get built in this market pretty easily. Yeah,
but it is important that they are Western or overseas universities in developed countries who are delivering this curriculum, because
already,
at the basis of this is this fundamental reputation for quality. And that's what they're looking for: greater quality online than they could get the opportunity in their own country, particularly in that stage of their career or their life.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so I think loads of people are seeing this, that for this fantastic opportunity, but I'm going to expand it even further. This doesn't have to be just China, does it? Is this the future for, another mega population like India, rapid population growth in places like Indonesia or Nigeria we're seeing? I think the UN say something like the population growth of the earth will come from 9 countries or something up to 2050. There's some countries that are going to grow rapidly, more than they can build capacity for in terms of education terms. So is this just China, Charlie, or could you do this for other countries?
No, I mean, there's nothing special about the Chinese working professional market outside of the specific model you need to serve them, but the needs are the same across a variety of countries. Most of the partner universities that we work with either are using China as their first step, or they're using a different country as their first step and then coming to us second, right? And so we foresee, when you think about the stacking of enrollments and diversification options and revenues from these kinds of partnerships, if you're able to bring in 1,000 to, this is small from our perspective, but 1,000 to 2,000 students, right, from each of these 4 or 5 major markets, you have a very, very strong, very well diversified revenue base. And most of the universities, it's a challenge to do the first one, obviously. Like, it's obviously mission aligned. It has lots of synthesis with what they're doing, but to take the first step and figure out how to deliver internationally is hard. Once you get that model correctly in the institutional structures, it's relatively easy to find additional partners in different markets. And, for us, the Chinese market is massive. We're very comfortable with it, but even we are seeing outreach from Southeast Asia. Part of that is the Chinese diaspora in other countries, in Vietnam and all the way down to Singapore and such. But some of it is, again, there aren't ways for Vietnamese English speakers to take international degrees from NAU or something like that. And so we're already talking to Carmen about how do we figure out ways to solve more different countries' needs around that. The big question, and Carmen, I know you're thinking about this, is what are the tuition price points, the language of instruction levers, the support needed, the technology infrastructure, because each of those is an operational need that needs to be mapped individually. I mean, we think about this too, individually to each country. And I know that's certainly harder because, to figure out when the markets are not India or China, right? Those two are simplistic because they're so large and generally homogenous in terms of delivery model. But Carmen, I don't know how you're thinking about that though overall.
Yeah, no, I think, we're also having conversations, thinking beyond, that region of the world and, recognizing we're in a state that's a borderline community with Mexico and with Central and South America. And so we have, large Spanish speaking audiences across the state of Arizona, and we're a Hispanic serving institution at Northern Arizona University. And so, we're also starting to talk about, what's the opportunity look like to do instruction in Spanish and how we can appeal to that audience within our sort of side of the globe. But then, again, I think to Charlie's point, once the infrastructure is built, thinking about it, how to sort of replicate that in other languages or in other regions becomes exponentially easier because you've built the infrastructure and you've got an approach that works. And then it's really just thinking about what is the pricing and what does the market look like, and does it make sense to invest and expand the portfolio in some of those ways?
Yeah, I guess it's difficult because the potential is so huge to choose which course to go with and which market to go with. I guess that's probably the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can only again have to decide how much capacity we have and focus our energies where we're going to have the most impact.
And for some universities, as particularly as I'm coming from the standpoint of working mainly with U.S. and Canadian institutions, we've struggled in some of the markets that you've noted, particularly in Southeast Asia outside of Vietnam. Those large Muslim majority quasi-democracies like Indonesia and Malaysia, Australia, and not surprisingly the Dutch, and to a lesser degree, the UK, have just done much better. We have not, to the US, created the pathway for the on-the-ground learner. So creating a potential footprint in those countries and looking at these either niche or novel markets like that, I think is a great opportunity. I would also look at the Gulf of Guinea, Nigeria, Ghana, which will provide eventually, we're already seeing it through visa applications, more on-ground learners. But to be a first mover in those countries and engage with them, this could also be an opportunity, particularly in the majors you mentioned, with an extension of econ is much stronger in those countries, that West Africa, Gulf of Guinea region.
Okay, so there's some more questions coming in now. Someone, Andy, has missed the start of the session. So he just wants you to double down on who these learners are and that the course is in Mandarin. I think a lot of people can't believe that you're converting the whole curriculum into Mandarin, or at least the majority of it. Charlie, Carmen, just explain.
Yeah, these are Chinese language programs. I mean, we do operate English language programs as well. I mean, some of them will work if the model is built correctly, but honestly, that's not as interesting and innovative of a space overall, and doesn't really meet the needs of the learners. It's actually, for the universities, it's a talent strike, right? Like the most talented working professionals in China are obviously speaking Chinese. They have no interest in coming to America. They want to continue to build their companies and stuff. So yeah, these are Chinese language programs, fully supported in Chinese and fully supported by local support staff, but they are built on programs that already exist at the university. And the biggest question as it comes to obviously accreditation and internal review is it the same? Are we, the thing we are doing here, is it the same as what we were doing there? The language is a mechanism, but the quality of the program, Carmen, I'm sure you have more sophisticated language around that, but that's the big focus is it the same? Like this program has to deliver the same thing that the English language program does.
Yeah, and it's a big part of the reason why, we hire the faculty, we ensure, that their credentials align with our expectations for their fellow peers and faculty in their departments. And we just happen to be looking for faculty who also have, proficiency in Mandarin to be able to do the translation of content, and then to support the students. I will acknowledge, for us in Northern Arizona, as context, Flagstaff, Arizona, it's a smaller city in the Southwest of the U.S. There isn't an enormous Mandarin-speaking population in our local community where the kind of the flagship campus is, and so we've really had to, again, this is an example where we've had to push the boundaries in some of our systems and processes in the institution to be able to look at hiring individuals that potentially are out of state and remote hires. And for our online team, that's something that we're comfortable with and is something that we do in other cases as well. But where this was an example of, because of the specific talent that we needed to be able to support this program, we had to kind of push some of our university systems a little bit in order to accommodate that.
Okay. Right. Final question here then. So what's the smallest MVP you'd recommend an institution starts with to understand the market and the process? Does it need to be a full degree?
Yeah. So we've tried. We've tried certificates, short courses, things like that. The Chinese market is saturated in them. It's actually not that they're not good and not viable. It's a very difficult business model for anybody to build out. And my understanding is that that's also true domestically in the States. I don't know how that is internationally, but the degree is a rare resource. And therefore, a lot of people are very willing to migrate into, to work with, to enroll in those kinds of programs, and they're rare. And therefore, there's a lot of interest and demand and excitement from the professional upskilling perspective. In China, there's an incredibly mature, highly diversified certificate or non-credit space, and that is just it's very difficult. It doesn't really work. What we have found slightly interesting is that if you build these degree programs, you should always build a degree program first in the China market, at least. I don't know about other markets, but we should always build a degree program first. Once that first flagship degree program is built, there is space for supplemental reasons. The students want to continue their education with the university. So you can always build certificates, short courses, experiences, come to campus excursions, things like that on the backs of that first program. But if you start with the thing that is too competitive and not as interesting and not as diversified, that has not been a good model yet.
Yeah. And Carmen, yours is 6-month subscription model, isn't it? So it's broken down into these elements. And do you find that learners take them consecutively? Do they just follow through, or do they have breaks between?
Yeah, I was gonna say we actually have seen students that have come in incredibly motivated to try to work through the curriculum as efficiently as they can, because they're trying to maximize that subscription time frame and kind of get the best bang for their buck in terms of that subscription cycle. And so they could finish their master's degree in as little as 2 subscriptions if they're really focused in moving through the coursework in an efficient manner. So it's definitely there are life circumstances, as there are with any adult learner, that sometimes they need to take a break, or within that 6-month time frame, maybe they work really hard and move through a curriculum quickly at the beginning and have to take a pause during a peak season of life or at work for a window of time, and then jump back in. And it gives them the flexibility outside of that kind of rigid term-based semester schedule that we otherwise have to work around otherwise. And so it offers that flexibility, which is really appealing for this type of learner.
Okay, we are out of time, I'm afraid. The hour has flown, and thank you to everybody who's asked a question and engaged with us here. If you want to find out about Beacon Education, you can click on the link at the bottom here. But I think all of you are happy for people to reach out on LinkedIn, Absolutely. Continue this conversation, ask your advice, or expand on some of the things you've said. We are all going to be at NAFSA, I believe, next week, so people can book appointments with us. And yeah, I think this is going to grow and grow and become such a kind of focus of interest around diversification of revenue and the relationship with China in particular. So thank you so much for your time, and I will see you all again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Safe travels to New Orleans. Hope to see y'all there.
Yeah, see you in New Orleans.